They didn't have an idea, and they weren't solution-centric, which I talk about in the book, is a solution-centric business where you've got an idea, you've got a vision, and you execute on it, and you're almost trying to force the buyer into your vision. What we saw with those successful companies is that was the paradigm shift.
Welcome to the Buyer-Centric OS. Buyer-Centric OS, a system for revolutionary customer experience. With your hosts, Andy Halko and Tony Zayas. This show helps you turn guesswork into growth by putting your buyer at the center of everything.
All right, welcome everybody. Excited here for our first show. We're going to be talking about the Buyer-Centric Operating System, creating a buyer-centric approach throughout this series. Andy is the author of the brand new book, The Buyer-Centric Operating System, kind of the complete philosophy and approach that we'll be diving into. But I think today we wanted to introduce the concept and talk about kind of the thought behind it, where it came from, and tell a bit more. So Andy would love to hear a bit of an intro about the book.
Tony, I'm so excited to have this book out. It's been a major, effort to pull all this together. And it's really come from the last 2 decades that I've worked with such a wide range of clients and businesses and leadership teams, marketing teams, sales teams. And there's been this one simple thing that has been at the center of it that I've figured out is that if you center yourself around your target customer, around your audience, around your buyer, you are significantly more successful. And what we've seen is that founders that we've talked to on previous shows, you know what they do in the beginning stages when they're successful is they talk to customers one-on-one. For marketing teams that we've worked with that really succeed, what do they do right is they think from their customer's perspective and understand their pains. They really match that in advertising and emails, and they create landing pages that really connect personally and mentally with their target audience. Sales teams, when they get into the meeting and they focus more on their buyer or their potential customer than they do on themselves, they close more deals. And product teams that build really great products that people adopt, keep, and can't let go of, it's because they went back and they talked to customers and they built the product around features that people really needed and really wanted. And so if you come back to all of these lessons across pretty much every aspect of a company, the concept is that if you really take a perspective from your target audience, your buyer, and you make that the hub of your business and everything runs around it, that's when you see massive success. And the book that I have been working on is how do you take that from an idea to an operating system? How do you take it from some simple philosophies and theories and turn it into daily actions and metrics and pieces that you can install into the company to actually operationalize being buyer-centric? And so this book is really about not just explaining the idea and why it's so important and how you become successful by centering yourself around a buyer, but it is actually a how-to, a walkthrough with very detailed elements of where's your maturity model of buyer centricity? What is the lens that you need to be looking through? What's the flywheel that gets motion in the company around the buyer? And then the framework, which describes exactly the pieces that you need to install to operationalize being buyer-centric. And so the book is truly this great manual for any company that wants to build success by being a buyer-centric business.
It's a great overview of the process. And I think our goal for these shows will be to be supplement like to the what's in the book and the concepts behind the book to help everybody kind of understand and digest pieces at a time. So it's not just a concept, but it's something that you can implement. And I was going to ask, Andy, why do you we used to, in our agency and consultancy, we used to talk about being results obsessed, and that was delivering results for the client. When we dug deeper, kind of this paradigm shift came about. It was really what you have to follow to deliver on that is to really intimately understand the buyer. Why do you think there's a lot of talk about like customer-centric marketing and this and that? Why do you think that it is a challenge for organizations to adopt this? The concept seems so obvious, but what are the challenges that are in the way?
So there's really a whole long chapter on this, right? The 4 forces that pull you away from being buyer-centric. And there's a couple of them. One, you look at, we talk about organizational gravity, the fact that as you get bigger and you see things like committees that make decisions, red tape, these things destroy buyer centricity. And what we've seen is that committee approach is that when you get 10 voices in there that have their own agendas, quickly the buyer's agenda is what disappears. Or red tape where you've got to get approvals from every different level, or you can't do certain things. All of a sudden, when you know what is right for the buyer, you hit a wall. And that's organizational gravity. You end up getting bias, which is folks in the organization that feel like they know better. They use gut instinct. They use anecdotes from 10 years ago and other biases that really pull you away from the buyer. And then, we'll get into it more in depth, but there are 4 forces that are just natural in any business that take away and pull us away from our target audience. And the whole concept really of the framework and how we operationalize it is fighting those forces and bringing us back in a way that becomes not just cultural, but operational.
Right. I love how you mentioned a little bit earlier about talking to founders, and we've talked to hundreds of founders over the last few years. And it's so common that at that very early stages, they're spending such a significant amount of time actually talking to their customers, their users, their clients. And then as the company grows, they move away from that. And I think that's like such a good illustration of how, some of those factors kind of pop up and begin to grow and make things a little more challenging if you don't have something in place like the Buyer-Centric OS.
Yeah, I think we talked to like 200 founders, and it rings in my memory of these conversations for some of the ones that went on to multi-million-dollar, going close to billion-dollar businesses. Was that I remember, so many times I heard we really talked to customers like we didn't build a product. We went out and we prototyped an idea, we put it in front of someone, we got a lot of feedback before we built anything. And that was such an interesting trend to me, is how many folks that were successful weren't about building themselves. They didn't have an idea, and they weren't solution-centric, which I talk about in the book, is a solution-centric business where you've got an idea, you've got a vision, and you execute on it, and you're almost trying to force the buyer into your vision. What we saw with those successful companies is that was the paradigm shift. Their mindset was, before we build anything, we have to have a lot of conversations with customers. And we have to put ideas in front of them, and we need them to poke holes in those ideas. And they built nothing without basically the approval of their target audience. And so, I just remember across those 200 founders that the ones that just were the amazing businesses, that was their story. They weren't solution-centric, they were buyer-centric.
Yeah, and it's compelling to see that pattern when you're talking to founders on a regular basis, seeing the successful ones that are kind of hitting that same point. It's definitely something to it, and definitely ties into what we're doing here. We plan on doing this. We'll be doing a weekly show here. Again, the book is now live, so congrats, Andy, to get it out there. You guys can find that on Amazon. It's the Buyer-Centric Operating System. Look it up, purchase it, read it, and join us, because we're going to talk through each of the steps, the chapters, kind of all the ways that you can implement this approach into your business, any type of organization. You need to meet the needs and wants and desires of that buyer, and that's what we will help you do here.
Yeah, I'm excited to do the show. I think, the book gives you a lot. I think the show, we're going to be able to provide some great context, nuance, stories that take all of this instructional approach, but give it real meat to help you just infuse it into what you're doing. And I really do believe that organizations that take this buyer-centric mindset, that they focus on their customer more than their solution, their customer more than their company, that those are the ones that will thrive, not just survive. Especially as we get into things like AI and automation, you really want to do that based off of what your customer wants, what your buyer needs. So I think this is going to be a great resource for folks with the book, and the video series that we're now launching is just going to help organizations that believe in this become amazing buyer-centric companies.
Yeah, excited to kind of dive into this journey with our viewers here and our readers of the book. So we will see you next time, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.
Again, we'll see you again. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into the Buyer-Centric OS. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and grab your copy of the Buyer-Centric Operating System by Andy Halko, available now on Amazon. For more tools and insights, visit andyhalko.com.